Good afternoon, Matt.
Hey Graham, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. I'm a little bit sleep deprived. This is our second attempt at recording this podcast. Let's see how we go, eh? Let's see how we go. Welcome to the Crazy in Love podcast, where two psychotherapists talk all things relationships. We are today talking about affairs, and in particular, the idea that the grass isn't always greener, right, Matt?
Yeah. And I guess your headline on the blog post that you wrote was something like, "Don't fall for the illusion that a different relationship will be necessarily any better." What's that's sort of the big summary. What are the headlines beneath that?
I think the headlines beneath it are very few people feel satisfied with an affair. So they might feel dissatisfied in their relationships, but I think it's only 10% of affairs lead to marriages, and only three out of four of those marriages and relationships after affairs end up in divorce.
Yeah.
So let me just go over that one more time. That's one in four of 10% end up in very, very healthy long-term relationships. That's a pretty tiny number of people who end up having affairs that lead to decent long-term relationships. I think what we want to tease out in this conversation is why people fall for the illusion, right? Why do people fall for the illusion that different is better, that what is lacking in their current relationship might be made up for by having an affair and having a relationship with someone else?
The other headline figure that you gave was that affairs are surprisingly common. So although they don't work, quote unquote, they are quite common. So I think the number you had in there was that 20% of married men have cheated.
Yes,
But
yes.
it's not a minority pursuit, is it? Esther Perel, who sometimes gets in trouble for sort of seemingly sanctioning affairs, or not taking them as the ultimate red line and arguing that there can be a way back from them, says that sometimes when she's speaking to a room of people, she will ask who's been impacted by an affair. And she says like something like her estimate is 80% of people raise their hand because they are the partner who's done the cheating, or they've been on the receiving end of it, or they grew up as kids where that went on in the family, or they're friends of people, a couple who've had an affair. So its impact is huge. Huh?
Its impact is huge. Often we talk about those affairs that are acknowledged and admitted within relationships. There's also, of course, the undercurrent of people who are having secret affairs. And one stat in the piece is about the number of marriages, or the percentage of marriages that end where one party is having a secret affair. Really, really, really high. So
Yeah.
yes, it can be difficult in a relationship to respond maturely to a betrayal by one party, but there's many of the couples we will be seeing in couples work, right, in our offices, will be one party will be having an affair whether they tell us or their partner or not.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a dynamic in our work as well as their relationship.
You've got, so what do we take from that? We take that affairs often make us unhappy. Lots of people pursue them nevertheless. Tell us maybe a bit as to why that might be. Why do we go after the affair?
I think we mainly have affairs because we're human. And what I mean by that is that as humans, we are subject to the same cognitive biases as everyone else, along the lines of we hate boredom. So studies
Yeah.
suggest that we're more likely to want to shock ourselves in a room when we've got give ourselves an electric shock in a room where there's nothing else to do, literally nothing else to do than sit there with our own thoughts. We hate being bored, and affairs offer excitement. They offer
Mm,
something completely different to our day-to-day experiences and our relationships. So it's understandable in that sense that people are drawn to affairs.
yeah.
There's a concept called hedonic adaptation that I think is worth exploring as well. That's a fancy way of basically saying that we think something outside of what we currently have is going to make us really happy, but we revert to the norm. Once we buy the new car, we get used to the new car. Once we're back from the holiday, our happiness levels go back to normal. We tend to have a kind of default happiness setting, and that's true in relationships as well. So if our satisfaction generally with life and relationships is a 6 or a 7 out of 10, we have an affair and we meet someone new, over time our default happiness is likely to go back to that 6 or 7 out
Yeah.
of 10. We
There's
also
something about lottery winners and people who are lose the use of their limbs in like road traffic accidents as well, and how they default to the happiness. Hedonistic adaptation, probably slightly different from that, isn't it? You get the thing and then you adapt to it and it's no longer special. But also I think what you're bringing in there is those defaults tend to be pretty strong. So even if you introduce something, what would seemingly be an amazing opportunity or a devastating circumstance, we are remarkably adaptable to our baselines.
Yeah, and you think about the reality of an affair, right? It's likely to be mysterious and exciting to begin with, but it
Yeah.
can't stay mysterious and exciting for years and years and years. At one point, you end up in a relationship together, and you have all the struggles and all the problems of an existing relationship, but with a new person. And you might tell yourself the lie that this new person is suddenly going to transform your happiness in
Yeah.
life. But chances are, more often than not, they're going to be someone who reflects back to you all the similar problems or slightly different problems that your current partner has.
You swap out one set of problems for another, maybe.
Yeah, to some degree. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. And if you're dissatisfied with the mundane nature of a life in a relationship, for example, in terms of just sharing the teeth brushing with someone and the laundry and the raising the kids and the having to clean out the guinea pigs once a week or whatever it might be, all sorts of tasks that you need to do with someone that you find a bit instinctively dull and boring and routine, at some point that affair has to transition into some sort of relationship and some sort of domesticity in all likelihood, which if that's the issue, then that's an issue within you more likely than in the relationship that you're in.
You were taking us through those three reasons. I think I've probably interrupted you. We get bored easily. We think new stuff will make us happy. And then you were going to talk about the third of those reasons. What might...
The third and final kind of cognitive bias is towards negativity. So we see that in depression, we see that in anxiety, is that sense of black or white catastrophic thinking that even with outside of mental illness and mental struggles, mental health struggles, all of us to some degree or other suffer from some sort of negativity bias. We look for problems, partly so we can solve them, of course, partly so we can try and make ourselves happier. But that does mean that in a long-term relationship, you're going to be pretty hypersensitive to any issues that you find in it, any problems that you find. So you might have a partner who meets the vast majority of your needs, but your tendency might be to focus on the negativity and on things that you're not getting. So in couples therapy, in couple sessions, we might then work to help someone identify with gratitude what they do have in their existing relationship, rather than think and fall into that trap of thinking, well, what I really need is this big thing that my current partner can't provide. So all I need to do really to be happy is find that elsewhere, whether that's excitement, whether that's greater sexual attraction, whether that's financial security, whatever it might be.
Yeah. And long-term relationships are tough as well. I guess that's the other side of it, right? Those reasons you're giving, and long-term relationships can, I guess, fall into routine or drudgery, can feel a bit like a habit. Can you say a bit more about that? Why would that be? We've got this sort of fantasy, haven't we, that we'll grow old together, we'll be one another's support and life witness and all of that. Why is it not that easy? What goes wrong?
I just want to start by gently challenging that, just because we fall into that pattern or that theme of making long-term romantic relationships seem a bit bloody boring at times.
Yeah. Well, like hard work, huh?
A bit too hard work. And hard work in the sense of, you can think of hard work in a lot of different ways. You can think of it being a miner down a mine and having to break your balls for 10 a day, or you can think of it like an elite sportsman or sportswoman, right? You can say, okay, this is something that we need to perfect and keep working hard at and keep trying really hard, but the rewards at the end of the day are really worthwhile. And that's the bit that I think often gets lost when you're in the depths of that relationship's mundanity and the boredom within it. So the daily routines inevitably make you lose sight of, well, we're in a relationship and we need to keep working on it. We need to keep working on how do we make each other feel happy? How do we communicate better with time? Like anything else worth fighting for in life, a good relationship requires a bit of hard work from time to time, but it can be 100% worthwhile putting that work in.
It's a nice reframe, isn't it? That I think the risk is that it can seem like drudgery or labor or whatever, but actually, if you change the metaphor or the imagery, put a different frame around it, can feel like something that you're trying to excel at and continue to be, excellent at.
and do it together. It can give you a sense of collaboration in that. So rather than, I think what inevitably happens with affairs, just bringing it back there, you tend to think of it from the first person perspective. You tend to think, what do I need? You don't
Yeah.
think, what does this relationship need to improve? And I think, again, that's where couples therapy can really help, is to see it as a collaborative endeavor that you're working on together. It doesn't happen by accident that you fall into those patterns. And maybe those patterns do need to change within a relationship, but you need to do that together. If one person's doing all the work, it's not going to resolve itself.
Yeah, yeah. And you see that in your work. You see couples where one person is maybe more willing or more open to change, and the other one is more stuck. Or you see kind of, I guess sometimes what I see is no one wanting to go first. Good description of the problem. Often I'm seeing people who are quite sophisticated in the world, so they understand what's going wrong, got reasonably good analysis of what the kind of pinch points are, but no one's really come full of vim and vigor to change what they do.
Yeah, I'd broadly agree with that. I think I'd be a bit more positive and optimistic. I tend to see couples where both people clearly want the relationship to work
Yeah.
in the main,
Yeah.
and they're willing to work hard for that. And they'd much rather put the effort in and the money in and the time in than accept that the relationship is finished. And I think what the bit that I would agree with that you're talking about is that the self reflection can be there, but what they might need help with is the dynamics between the two of them. How are they falling into the same familiar traps? And practically, what tools and techniques can they use to change that? And actually, some of those, like we've talked about before, none of them are rocket science, right? They can be quite simple interventions on a daily basis, or simple ways out of an argument, or simple ways of showing gratitude and love for one another that day by day can have quite a transformational impact quite quickly.
Yeah. What I hear quite a bit, if it's okay just to riff for a second, is that it shouldn't be this hard, shouldn't be this difficult, should it? And often it's said to me as a question, it shouldn't be this difficult, should it? Relationships shouldn't require this level of work or commitment or care or attention or tending or whatever else it is. And that I often want to take issue with that, because I think, well, what else in life that you value doesn't need care or tending or attention or whatever? But you hear that kind of complaint, or that maybe not complaint, but just kind of they've gotten lost because the messages within the culture are that relationships will be easy, they'll take care of themselves, they should be endlessly fulfilling, etc.
Yeah, and the danger of that mindset is that whenever problems arise, you think that the relationship isn't right for you.
Yeah,
So, in answer to your question, I think that idea is nonsense, the absolute nonsense, and we should be really quite firm with that idea that relationships don't need work. Of course, they need work. Why wouldn't they need work? And even if it was just with the reality of you're two human beings that are going to change over time, if you expect yourselves to be connected and satisfied with one another 40 years into the future, and you both acknowledge that you're going to change substantially as individuals over that time because you're human and you will, why on earth would it not take work to follow each other on that,
yeah,
and
yeah.
to work hard to try and meet each other's needs in new and different ways along the way? Of course that's going to need conversation and hard work.
I would say also that you are baking in like moments of disconnect and moments where like that person just doesn't get you, or you don't really understand why something is of particular importance to them, that is not catastrophic, that those are not grounds for divorce, right? You're not going to be in, you're not going to be in symbiosis with somebody. You're just not going to get into their skin. You're not always going to know what's going on for them. You're sometimes going to be puzzled by their reaction or feel like they've not really understood what it is you're conveying to them. And sometimes those things feel devastating rather than just ordinary and like part of the rough and tumble of it.
Yeah, would you agree that that goes in phases as well in the relationship? So it could be like months at a time that you're kind of missing each other a little bit and disconnecting, and feel like one of your partner's annoyed with you or drifting, and you're finding it difficult to connect, rather than just those micro moments during the day where someone's a bit tired or hungry or bored or pissed off or whatever it might be. That
Yeah, it still
there's
comes
a
at,
reality of you've just got to hold on in there to some degree at certain time, hunker down, get through, and find your way out, maybe with some external help and
yeah.
some rethinking and hard work, and you'll find your way back together more often than not.
we often talk about football when we're off air, not recording, right? And it's sort of, it feels like phases of a game to me, like moments of passages of like a wonderful, expressive, open play, attacking play, and moments where you're, I don't know, getting everybody behind the ball, crowd in the box, hanging on.
Yeah, it makes me think of teams sacking managers too early as well. Hold on in there. Hold
Yeah,
on in there. Uh,
yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
yeah, it feels more like a season than a game to me. It's more like, you're gonna have some games where for whatever reason it just doesn't work.
Right.
Don't worry too much about the noise. Like focus occasionally on what you can identify as ways to improve.
Yeah,
Hold
yeah.
on in there. Keep talking. Keep being kind to each other. Chances are you'll make it through.
Yeah, I like that sort of bad day at the office. We go again kind of thing.
Yeah, we go again. Such a cliche, isn't it? We go again.
Um,
Right.
I was thinking about your question in terms of sort of um, phases within a relationship. So often I see that when a couple are stepping into family life. So maybe they've had their first or even their second child. I think second child can feel disruptive again. You haven't quite got the hang of it. You don't quite know what it means to be outnumbered, etc. But particularly first time around, it turns out you had very different expectations and ideas of what that would bring. So one partner is loving it, enjoying themselves, able to cope with it. It's roughly what they were expected, or it's better than they were, even imagining it to be. And the other person feels a bit lost, despair part, or it's not coming as naturally to them. It's those sort of moments where the disconnect shows up, and rather than panicking or thinking we're fundamentally incompatible, there could be a conversation about that. There could be some kind of shared understanding. There could be some negotiation around trade-offs rather than throwing
Yeah.
throw.
Yeah. Well, do you think? I guess we're talking on the assumption that affairs happen when there's a disconnect. Affairs happen when there is uh, uh, a disconnect between two people and a phase of their relationship where things aren't going great and something missing in the relationship. Like, does that analysis feel right to you? That it tends to be something has gone stale or something isn't exciting like it used to be that drives affair, rather than the more kind of impulsive affair, the more impulsive sense of, oh, I've just had a couple of drinks and I'm going to sleep with someone at the office party. Is your kind of psychological perspective more that this happens? I mean, it's definitely mine, but I was interested in whether we're in agreement here that
Yeah.
impulsive affairs don't tend to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a variety of inputs, aren't there? A variety of impulses that lead to that. There's an opportunity as well, isn't there? You've probably got to be away from home. There's probably got to be a hotel or something like that involved in it. There are circumstances that I think make it more or less likely. But yeah, I think broadly, if the relationship is good, if you're working towards something that feels like a shared endeavor, you're just less inclined to do that. You're thinking through the consequences for the other person, for your medium long-term happiness. I think it's often when something's gone bad or gone wrong, or you can't turn to the person you with, and you think the only answer is to find that in someone else.
What about the kind of deeper individual psychological barriers along the lines of kind of fear of commitment, for example? Does that show up in your work very often?
A little, but not
Not as much.
often. It's
Yeah.
not. No, it's not the major thing, and
Yeah, I
nor
agree.
nor is sexual attraction really, because I
Yeah.
think that's baked in, isn't it? You're always going to see other people if you're working in an office environment, working around other people. There are always going to be those moments and opportunities, and it really, I think, the feeling that you find somebody else attractive, for example, I don't think is like terribly interesting or important. It's always what you're going to do on the back of that and what you're going to blow up in order to pursue that, because that's usually what happens when you have an affair, right? You do blow something up if it
Yes.
becomes. I wondered if that was our segue to talk about why divorce is bad, or why you'd want to avoid those things. I think you talk about family, friends, finances as maybe the sort of three areas. I wondered if you wanted to say a bit more about the impact that a rift or a divorce is going to have.
Yeah, I think it was 1 in 3 of people who got divorced really deeply regret that decision, partly because of all the impacts that a divorce has. And of course, what that figure doesn't pick up is all the people that don't necessarily think it was the worst decision they've ever made, but it hasn't necessarily improved their lives. It just has such a massive impact. If you think about or a couple that's been together for say 20, 30 years, all the ways that their lives are entwined, they might have bought assets together, they might have been raising children together, they might have shared friends, and just trying to find a way to get through all of that
Yeah.
whilst maintaining your sanity and maintaining some sort of half decent life off the back end of it, I think is really, really, really hard work. And it's expensive, it's time consuming, it's emotionally draining, and you're likely to end up with a smaller life off the back of it. I mean that in every sense. You're likely to live in a smaller house with a smaller bank balance, with a smaller number of friends, and a smaller uh, size of your social life and life in general off the back of it. You're likely to see your kids less often than you want to, for example.
Yeah.
Divorce is
And I
not
think that's
an experience. I think in the article we refer to one of the UK's leading divorce lawyers whose number one tip for divorce is not getting divorced. Don't do it unless you have to.
I agree. I think it's well put. I was thinking about couples who want to separate where they have got children, for example, because the communication has become so difficult that it seems like the easiest solution. And my mind always goes to this is going to be so much harder when there are new partners involved and maybe blended families. And you can't agree on it now. Like, how on earth are you going to agree who's picking them up from swimming on a Wednesday when you're at war over your finances or you're fed up because they seem to have bounced back and their life's in better shape than yours? That feels to me unrealistic. It's a sort of minor prosaic point, but it's like, wow, you think this is going to be the solution. I suspect you're going to make this harder.
Mm, mm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, when you see affairs happen in the clinical work or in friendships outside of your clinical work, does it tend to then lead to divorce? Does it tend to kind of lead to that life explosion that we're kind of talking about here?
I think that's the other thing that's worth picking up on. I'm not sure this is an answer, but so much as an observation. So, what do you call the piece? Something like the grass is probably not greener, and
Yeah.
there's a probably in there, isn't there? Like the sort of the thrust of Esther Perel's book on affairs is that they can lead somewhere else. It can lead to a better place. Like something's gone wrong. The affair really crystallizes what's gone wrong. It's not that the affair itself is the thing that's wrong. It's like there's been a bunch of stuff leading up to that point, and that's the thing that needs to be fixed. The Gottmans talk about marriage one and marriage two after an
Mm.
affair. The marriage two is a new thing and sometimes can be a better, richer thing that gives you something you want. So, I mean, we're not saying and no divorce ever, are we, or anything like that? But also there are ways of coming back from that if you want to, if you wish to, if you're both willing to see that you've had a hand in that. And I think that's much harder for the person who hasn't cheated, who hasn't gone outside the relationship, to be told that they might need to take some responsibility for that having happened.
Yes, there's obviously the small subset of people who genuinely do find their life partner through an affair, and they end up living a happy life. And good luck to them. This isn't a moral issue. This is about what we think generally for the majority of people leads to a good, satisfying life. Uh, I there's there's something there about the within a relationship, though, the sense of betrayal is not just about the act of the affair, is there? I get your point about the Gottman's idea and Estelle's idea that there's something that hasn't been confronted by both parties that ultimately leads to an affair. But as you described earlier, there's a sequence of micro steps, isn't there, towards an affair? There's the conversation
Usually,
of the
yeah,
office. There's usually then the booking of the hotel room. There's then the lies afterwards.
yeah,
There's usually a whole sequence and an aftermath and a kind of echoes across the relationship of all these different steps and all these different decisions, each of which can feel like a betrayal that can be incredibly hard to work back from within a relationship.
yeah. I was talking to somebody outside of work a long while ago now, and I said, what happened between you and your partner, him having had an affair, and he said, I fell in love. as if it was a thing that you just fall into and you play no part in it. And it's like, come on, there were lots of coffees, weren't there? There were lots of meetings, there were lots of long lingering conversations. And the first time you agreed to whatever it was, stay late, hang back, all of that stuff. Those are a series of decisions that you might not know you're making, or, you might not
I
want to.
think I think most people do, though, don't they? Most people know that they're taking themselves down that avenue. Do you think?
Ultimately, I think they do. But I mean, there's that bit that wants to give ourselves a break, right? Doesn't want to think of ourselves as a cheat or a deceiver, or, somebody who's done something in such a calculated way. But that phrase, sort of fall in love, like you accidentally fell off a cliff. You were very near the edge of a cliff, weren't you? You were toying around with something that could lead you to easily fall.
Yeah, I like that. I like that.
We should probably finish up, shouldn't
Yeah.
we? You listed out 4 ways of avoiding temptation. You want to just maybe close off with
Yeah, they're kind of the opposites of what we were talking about earlier, really, aren't they? They're considering your biases and making sure that you are aware that you're human like everyone else, and you'll make the same intellectual mistakes. That if there are problems in your relationship, it's usually better to talk about them with your partner, to ask for what you need if you know what that is. And if you don't really know what that is and you're struggling to get it communicated and responded to, getting couples therapy before cheating is usually a better step. We would say that as couples therapists, we've got an incentive to say that.
yeah,
But I think even having declared that acknowledgement, I think it's still ultimately true. I think reminding yourself of some of those stats and themes in the evidence as well, that you might get tempted outside the relationship. You might be falling into that cognitive bias of thinking that you'll be happier with that other person, but the stats suggest that you won't be, in all likelihood, that you'll leave your current relationship and you'll be one of those, what is it, 90% or so of affairs that don't end up leading to any kind of long-term relationship and marriage. I think those are the kind of broad points to respond.
yeah. No, that's good. That's good. I always think it's workable. I tend to see couples who come a bit too late. That's always my observation. Oh, it's a shame you didn't come like sooner into that. But actually, also my experience is if they're both in the market for doing things differently and making some changes, there's actually quite a lot of hope. You
Yeah,
can, you can rebuild out something. You can quite readily reconnect people with why they fell in love, what they liked about that person, even when some of those characteristics turn out to infuriate you on some days. It's like, I do love that about them. I am still there for this. I think it's worth remembering that it is workable.
I like that a lot. I like that sense of hope quite a lot, and I really see it as well, as we were talking about before. It's not rocket science, couples therapy, but it can feel quite transformational on the other side of the other side of the table to a couple who haven't tried these techniques or thought about their relationship in that way. So that's nice note to end on.
Yeah. All right. Good. Well,
Good.
let's end there.
Let's leave it there. As ever, we're contactable at crazyinlovepodcastuk@gmail.com, and we'll see you soon. Nice to see you, Matt.
Cheers. Nice to see you too.